Hello everyone. Today, we are embarking on an exploration of a story that many would shy away from discussing. We're going to unravel the dark and complex legend of Isabella of France, a queen who, during her lifetime, became the victim of one of history's most sordid smear campaigns. This legend paints a picture far more sinister and disturbing than what is generally accepted. The truth is truly unforgettable. If you're prepared to delve into the raw and unfiltered reality of this intriguing saga, please give this video a thumbs up. I'd also love to hear your thoughts in the comments. How far do you think ambition can push a person? What you're about to discover will radically alter your understanding of politics, power dynamics, and the nature of revenge. Have you ever wondered how a black legend is born? How do wild and outrageous rumors morph into accepted historical fact echoing through the ages? Today, we will dissect one of the most vile propaganda campaigns ever documented: the shocking allegations of bestiality against Isabella of France. Yes, you heard that correctly. But before you dismiss this as mere grotesque gossip from the medieval period, it's essential to recognize that this is a chilling demonstration of psychological warfare. Isabella was not just a passive victim. She masterfully utilized these very lies to craft the sharpest weapon in her arsenal. Let's take a step back in time to 1308. Picture yourself at 13 years old, having been shipped off like cargo to one of the most hostile kingdoms in all of Europe. Your father? None other than Philip IV of France, also known as Philip the Fair. Yet, there was nothing fair about him. He was the man who dismantled the Knights Templar, bent the Pope to his will, and transformed France into a fearsome military power. And you, Isabella, were merely his prized pawn, with your future hinging precariously on a marriage to Edward II of England. But upon your arrival, an unsettling sensation washes over you. Something is deeply amiss. Edward II wasn't like other medieval kings who sought glory on the battlefield. Instead, he openly preferred the company of men, not in a platonic sense, but in a dangerously intimate manner. His heart belonged to Piers Gaveston, a nobleman from Gascony who practically wielded the scepter himself, receiving land, titles, and royal favors, essentially everything that was supposed to belong to you. You thought you were coming to be crowned Queen of England, but instead find yourself an unwelcome guest in your own palace. At your wedding, Edward barely registers your presence. Throughout the entire ceremony, his gaze is fixed on Gaveston while you stand alone, the object of pity and contempt from other nobles, who are all too aware of the true nature of your marriage. But you, the bride, can't speak up. Yet, Isabella proved to be no ordinary medieval princess. Instead of crumbling under the humiliation, she observed, learned, and strategized. While Edward and Gaveston indulged in their affair, Isabella quietly absorbed every weakness in the English kingdom. She mastered the language and memorized the loyalties and rivalries of the noble families, crafting a mental map of power not merely to survive but to dominate. Then, the whispers began. Initially subtle, they crept through the palace corridors. Why did the queen spend so much time sequestered? Why did she meet privately with royal advisors? Why was she more concerned with court politics than with embroidery or prayers? By 1315, these murmurs had morphed into something far more malign. The English court could hardly fathom a politically astute woman, so they resorted to the most straightforward and vile explanation their medieval minds could conceive. A clever woman must be either a witch or, worse, a depraved creature. Thus, rumors began to circulate that Isabella engaged in pagan rituals, had demonic correspondence, and that her intelligence stemmed not from study but from pacts with dark forces. Eventually, the worst imaginable accusation surfaced: bestiality. Yes, the slanderous claim was that Isabella of France, daughter of one of Europe's mightiest kings, was committing unspeakable acts with animals in the palace gardens. Absurd. Perhaps, but in the 14th century, such an allegation resonated deeply. In a time when a woman's ambition was viewed with suspicion, to be labeled a witch or a pervert was a standard narrative. This accusation of bestiality, deemed worse than adultery or prostitution, reduced a person to their most base and inhuman form. It left them corroded beyond redemption in the eyes of Christian society. What's most chilling, however, is that these rumors were not spontaneous. They were meticulously crafted by someone who knew exactly how to dismantle a woman of influence. This strategist was Hugh Despenser the Younger, Edward's new favorite after Gaveston's execution in 1312. Despenser was cold, ruthless, and terrifyingly competent, crafting a propaganda campaign that would silence Isabella. But Isabella was no fragile court decoration. She was a daughter of Philip the Fair, equipped not only with his intelligence but also with a profound thirst for revenge. Do you want to discover how the so-called bestial queen became one of Europe's most feared figures? What follows truly reshaped the rules of medieval politics. Hugh Despenser the Younger embodied everything that Isabella despised about the English court: cunning, mercilessness, and an innate talent for manipulation. However, he made a fatal mistake: he underestimated Isabella. After Gaveston's brutal execution, Edward II was devastated, leaving an emotional void into which Hugh swiftly stepped. From the outset, Despenser recognized Isabella as a significant threat, not because she was Edward's wife, but because she was intimately connected to France, the continent's dominant power. More critically, he understood her cunning intelligence. With the political tensions between England and France, Despenser saw an opportunity to deepen the existing suspicions against Isabella. He initiated a smear campaign that would go down in history. Rather than outright accusations, which were too risky, he carefully sowed doubt among the scribes and monks who depended on his patronage. Subtly, he would phrase questions like, "Isn't it peculiar how frequently the queen visits the stables at night? Surely it's benign, but some nobles have noted it." Just like that, a seed of suspicion was planted. The rumors did not spread like flames through the court. They acted more like a virus, slowly mutating through whispers from palace to church, tavern to town square. As these sordid allegations gained momentum, they grew increasingly lurid. People whispered about her midnight escapades, dark rituals, and animals held not for riding but for grotesque purposes. There were specific dates, locations, individuals who supposedly witnessed her so-called sorcery. The wild tales spiraled into absurdity. They described Isabella as a summoner of demons performing illicit rites surrounded by witches, even suggesting she had a stallion trained for unspeakable acts or that she feasted on innocent lives. What we see is the calculated genius of Despenser's tactics. The rumors weren't merely vague accusations. They were explicit, unforgettable, forged with the tools of medieval superstition. This campaign instilled fear of witchcraft, disgust for depravity, and contempt for foreign influence. The goal was crystal clear. If Isabella could be stripped of her humanity and framed as a beast or a witch, then her voice would hold no validity. And for a time, it worked. These tales swept across England with fervor, depicting Isabella not just as immoral, but as the very embodiment of sin. But the real chilling factor was that Isabella was well aware of the orchestration behind the rumors. Instead of succumbing to fear, she adopted a meticulous approach, systematically recording the sources of the rumors and examining who stood to gain politically from her disgrace. It was reminiscent of a master spy compiling her revenge list. Meanwhile, instead of retreating, Isabella walked with her head held high through the court. She approached her adversaries with confidence, facing them publicly, refusing to deny the rumors outright, as doing so would give them unwarranted power. Instead, she transformed the smear campaign into a farce that made her enemies appear desperate. Undeterred by the absurdity, they doubled down, escalating the rumors to an outrageous degree, claiming she not only engaged with beasts but had morphed into one herself, howling in the woods and trailing blooded claws. At this juncture of the narrative, even educated nobles began to express doubts about such ludicrous claims. The winds of change were stirring. Isabella recognized the openings and prepared for her counterattack. How does one dismantle a man who seeks to morph you into a myth? By explosively flipping the story. Isabella set out to become the very figure they feared. The moment arrived in 1324 when England and France clashed in what would be termed the War of Es Sardos. In what would become a significant blunder, Edward II sent Isabella, the supposedly monstrous queen, to negotiate peace with her brother, King Charles IV of France. Despenser believed this was a stroke of genius, solving two problems. Isabella would be absent from English politics, and if the negotiations failed, he could blame her. But Isabella understood the opportunity that lay before her. When she entered Paris in March 1325, she was no longer the distraught girl who had once sobbed amid the shadows of Edward's court. She was back on familiar ground, surrounded by nobles who remembered her as the princess, the royal heir, not as the twisted figure hung in English taverns. And she had no intention of returning a victim. She came with a plan. Her first strategic move was brilliant. She convinced her brother that her 12-year-old son, Edward III, should come to France to pay homage on behalf of his father, Edward II, for the lands held in Gascony. It was a standard feudal gesture, perfectly reasonable. Edward II had no choice but to acquiesce. By September 1325, young Edward was in Paris, and just like that, Isabella secured her greatest asset. The heir to the English throne was now shielded from Despenser's influence. Then Isabella executed her boldest maneuver. She refused to return home. Edward II pleaded, threatened, and bombarded her with letters imploring her to come back. But she rebuffed him with her iconic response, "I will not return while the Wolf remains in the fold," cleverly implying Despenser's true nature. It was poetic yet devastating. The established narrative had begun to shift. If Isabella was branded as the Wolf, perhaps it was because she had been driven to that point. In the midst of these political machinations, Isabella met Roger Mortimer, a powerful noble who had already been exiled for rebelling against Edward and Despenser. Their alliance blossomed into a passionate liaison no longer hidden from sight. The queen, once ridiculed for her alleged depravity, was now openly engaged with a formidable political adversary. The scandal was monumental, yet pivotal. It rendered the earlier rumors irrelevant. Instead of being the she-wolf of scandalous midnight rendezvous, Isabella transformed into the queen in exile, reclaiming her agency, rediscovering love, and solidifying an alliance that aimed to reclaim her rightful power. Over the winter of 1325, Isabella and Mortimer transitioned from lovers to conspirators, masterminding a breathtaking plan, an armed invasion of England led by the queen herself. Not as a lust for stature, but as a crusade against the oppressive regime that sought to dismantle her with shame, manipulation, and humiliation. Isabella aimed to obliterate the legacies of both Hugh Despenser and Edward II, ensuring they could never rise again. What is remarkable about her strategy is how she positioned herself in the eyes of her contemporaries. She depicted herself not as a traitor, but as a mother fighting for her son, the rightful heir, crafting impassioned letters to English nobles that painted her and Edward III as exiles wronged by tyranny. "It is not I who have abandoned England," she wrote, "but England that has abandoned its protectors." This message resonated profoundly. Many nobles were already disillusioned with Edward's leadership failures and the corruption of Despenser. Here was a fresh alternative, a queen and mother standing up against the injustices wrought by their so-called leaders. Stay tuned as we delve deeper into how Isabella's daring strategies and unyielding resolve transformed her from a figure of scorn to a formidable power broker in one of history's most riveting tales of intrigue and revenge.